50 years ago, Dr. King told the devotees of civil rights and human rights who came from all over the country, he told them from all races, incomes, and creeds, I'm all right. He told them all colors. He told them where they were and who they were and whose they were. Listen at what he said. Many people remember that I have a dream, but listen to the instruction on that day. Because it was not just a speech for applause. It was a rallying cry for the nation. It was a warning to the enemies of justice. It was a call to action. He said on that day, I'm not unmindful that some of you come here out of great trials and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells and come from areas where your quest for freedom has left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Isn't that what he said? That's what he said. He said, continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redempted. Then he said, he gave us some instruction. Go back to Mississippi. That's right. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing somehow this will be changed. In other words, go back to Charlotte. Go back to Lincolnton. Go back to North Carolina. Dr. King never told us to go to Washington, celebrate, and come back home and do nothing. His instructions, he understood that if you're going to change the nation, you must change states. And if you're going to change states, you must change southern states. And if you're going to change southern states, you must change southern legislatures and southern governors. He understood that state movements are national movements. He understood that we must build movements from Montgomery up, not Washington down. From Selma up, not Washington down. From Charlotte up, not Washington down. And so you and I are children of that instruction. Tell your neighbor, we're children of that instruction. All of us, black, brown, red, yellow, rich, poor, young, old, city, rural, Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, people of faith, people wrestling with faith, every creed, every color, every sexuality, all of us who believe in the dream of justice and equality, we are the children that must hear Dr. King's instruction. And so on today, the actual 50th anniversary of the March on Washington for jobs, for freedom, and for justice. It was not just a march to sing, to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. It was a march for jobs and justice and freedom and equality. But on this day, because the only way to really give tribute to all of those who came and sacrificed is imitation. We must remember that Dr. King was instructed as well in that day to leave out of his speech the I have a dream portion. He was told by some of his advisors, don't put it in. He first rehearsed it in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, then in Detroit. And he was told, leave it out. And so he was plowing through his prepared text. And then, almost as though God grabbed Mahalia Jackson. She wasn't on stage, she was off stage. And off stage, Mahalia said, Martin, tell him about the dream. Understand that he had spent 16 minutes talking about the nightmare. He spent 16 minutes criticizing America. He spent 16 minutes talking about the shamefulness in America. And that's important because you can't talk about the dream without understanding the nightmare. But on the other side is true. You can't ever let the nightmare have the final word. And so Mahalia said, tell him about the dream. He kept on plowing, and then a second time she hollered, Martin, tell him about the dream, Doc. And then he spoke of the dream. The dream we must have despite the nightmares of injustice. The dream we must have over against the legal tactics of interposition and nullification, where some people still attempt to use those things to deny justice. And like Martin, we have to listen to the voices off stage. Our friends, our foes, and the victims who need to be reminded of the dream. The voices off stage. like the 140,000 that live in poverty right here in Mecklenburg County. The voices off stage, the 22% of Mecklenburg County children that live in poverty, 40% of those people, children of color who live in poverty, 17% of those in this county who have no health coverage. A city with the highest increase of family homelessness. We must listen to the voices of those off stage. We must listen, as President Obama said today. He said for over a decade, working Americans of all races have seen their wages and income stagnant. Do you hear the voices off stage? They've had to deal with that even as corporate profits soar, even as the pay of a fortunate few explodes, as inequality rises, as the prison industrial complex grows better than many of our economic complexes in our local community. He said there's poverty that casts a pall over our youth. Do you hear the voices? Do you hear the voices of those who want what America has promised but keep being reminded by those who are regressive that when they say the growing inequality is the price of a growing economy? That's what President Obama said today. He said we have to get away from the language that says greed is good, compassion is ineffective, and those without jobs, without health care, without money have only themselves to blame. Instead, we must hear the voices off stage. And so today, honoring those who came before us and recommitting ourselves in this moment, we gather again in word and deed. And I want you to know we gather today simultaneously in 13 congressional districts. There's a gathering in Elizabeth City. There's a gathering in Wilmington. There's a gathering in Raleigh. There's a gathering in Dunn. There's a gathering in Silver. There's a gathering in Boone. There's a gathering in Raleigh. There's a gathering in Greensboro. There's a gathering in Wilmington. There's a gathering in Lincolnton. And there's a gathering right here in Charlotte. We are called to a deeply moral and constitutional vision of society. This vision demands that public policy be focused on justice for all and care for the common good. That's the kind of democracy we want. It's not about, for us, liberal versus conservative or Democrat versus Republican. For us, it's about what's right versus what's wrong. And as they marched then, we must march now. As they stood then, we must stand now. As they worked then, we must work now. And the only way to honor those of the past is to take up the legacy of justice now. And so as they did then, we are holding these rallies. We've held tomorrow Mondays in Raleigh. Out of Raleigh, we went to Asheville, 10,000 people, thousands here. And then we went to Mitchell County, where even the Republican chair and his daughter renounced the party because of the draconian bills coming out of the assembly. There's a movement going on, y'all. We're down in Dare County, where 1,000 people gather, and in Yancey County. We are holding these rallies to dramatize the shameful acts of our state legislature and our governor. And we're calling on all of our congresspersons to reauthorize Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, especially in light of the gross and vulgar suppressive attacks on voting. We're rallying people all over this state to organize, to mobilize their moral outcry, say moral outcry, the power of their love, the power of their unity, and the strength of their voices and their votes. And we must do it because we believe in the dream. And let me say what I believe Martin would say today. The dream is not about Martin King.
That's right.
The dream is as old as the prophet Amos saying, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. The dream is as old as the scriptures where Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. The dream is as old as the slaves refusing to give in to slavery, but instead sung, up above my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. The dream is as old as what America wrote on paper, but has not yet completed. We, the people of these United States, in order to form a more perfect union and establish justice. The dream is as old as what black and white people did in 1868 in this state, coming out of slavery, coming out of a civil war. They said, how will we have a new society? So blacks and whites got together and wrote in the preamble of North Carolina's Constitution, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, the enjoyment of the fruit of their own labor, and the pursuit of happiness. The dream is as old as what Langston Hughes mused one day when he said, oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet and yet must be. The land where every man is free. We must bring back our mighty dream again. Call me ugly names, but the steel of freedom does not stain. For those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. Oh yes, I say it plain. America was never America to me, and yet I swear by this oath that America shall be. That's the dream. The dream is the dream that celebrates the progress, but still believes we must finish the work. It's the dream that love and truth and justice are more powerful than lies and meanness and hatred. It is the dream of this state to be a state where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. It is the dream that we still believe that we can have economic sustainability. That's right. And address poverty, and pay people living wages, and have workers' rights. We still believe that we can have educational equality for all. We still believe we can have health care for all, protect Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, and protect our environment. We still believe that we can address the disparities in our criminal justice system that are caused by race and class. And we still believe that we can protect and expand voting rights and women's rights and civil rights and the rights of immigrants and human rights. That's the dream. And because we still believe the dream is why we must challenge and confront the nightmare. The nightmare of immoral, extreme public policies that have set upon our state by the legislative power of Tom Tillis and Berger and the executive power of Governor Pat McCrory and the money and influence power of Art Pope. We have to remind them that you might be high on coke, K-O-C-H, but we're not. You may be drunk on Tea Party tea, but we're not. You may be able to be bought by Pope's money, but we cannot be bought. We have to dramatize. Somebody say dramatize. Dramatize. Shameful condition. Hurts me to say it. It hurts me to see the governor today, as the governor of a southern state, acknowledge the March on Washington, but then say that he was going to keep the dream by lowering the tax burdens on people, when the fact is he just raised it on working people in this state. This legislature has led the most regressive government we've seen since Jim Crow. They've managed to attack everybody, even their own. They've attacked everybody. They've called Moral Monday citizens morons, outsiders. They even tried with Jay to put his picture up. The Civitas did, and used the Mississippi Sovereign Commission tactic to try to scare us away. Put your picture, your name, where you work. And one of the Board of Election chairs that the governor appointed down in Elizabeth City, who's trying to take all of the right of those students to vote, said last week when we went down there to tell him what the Constitution said, he said, you're bullies, and it wouldn't be surprised to me if somebody acted out of character and did violence to you, Reverend Barber, or violence to the people, the other people. Oh, the nightmare. This leadership has an extreme, nightmarish view of the world. That's why we have 500,000, a half million of those report cards. Because their vision is a constitutionally inconsistent, it's morally indefensible, and it's economically insane. In a state with the 5th highest unemployment, they cut 170,000 people's unemployment. Nightmare. $1.2 billion taken out of our economy. Nightmare. In a state where there are 1.6 million poor people and 600,000 children, they are denying 500,000 people, poor children, access to Medicaid. Nightmare. They raised taxes on 907,000 low-wage workers, many of them right here in Charlotte, so that they could give a tax credit to 23 of the wealthiest families. Nightmare. 64,000 of those families are military families. Nightmare. They've raised taxes on 80% of North Carolinians so they could give a tax break of $10,000 to millionaires. That's a nightmare. They've thrown 2,500 poor children out of the preschool program. Nightmare. They fired 5,200 teachers. Nightmare. They fired 4,580 teachers' assistants. Nightmare. They've driven North Carolina to 50th in teacher salary and 50th in per pupil expenditure. We're lower than Mississippi, lower than South Carolina, lower than Georgia, lower than Alabama. That's a nightmare. They've taken $10 million of your tax dollars and given it to private schools to fund private schools with no accountability and no clauses against resegregation. Nightmare. Then on top of that, they've passed the worst voter suppression bill we've seen in decades. Ended same-day registration, cut early voting, cut Sunday voting. They now allow vigilante poll watchers to go into your precinct and say, you don't look like you're registered to vote. They're refusing to allow 17-year-olds to register. They've made it easier to get absentee ballots that don't require voter ID. They've made it easier to carry guns and conceal guns than to register to vote. They passed a voter ID bill that's worse than Alabama and South Carolina. That denies access to 318,000 already registered voters in North Carolina. Rosa O'Neal Eaton is one of them, 92-year-old, our plaintiff, been voting since the days of Jim Crow. And now at 92, she wouldn't even be able under this law to go back and vote unless she got a new ID. Nightmare! These are the nightmare. But the nightmare demands that we stay committed to the dream. And we will. Won't we stay committed? Yes. Because we know there's a better way. We will educate the public. That's right. We will preach in our pulpits. Yes. We will put our bodies on the line. Yes. We will march like they used to march. Yes. We will speak to the conscience of North Carolina. Yes. We will even love those who live in the nightmare and hope for their deliverance. Yes. For we are the children of the dream. Yes. And we are not wrong, we are right. Our hope will not dissipate. Our faith will not resign. Our light will not go dark. Our love will not be diminished. And our will to see the uplift of all people, regardless of their creed, their color, their sexuality, their national origin, will never weaken. We are right, we're not wrong. The Holy Scripture says we're supposed to feed the hungry and care for the poor. And then you will be called repairers of the breach. We're right, we're not wrong. The Constitution says we must pursue justice. We're right, we're not wrong. And we will not turn back. And ultimately, we will not lose because truth is still greater than lies. It always has been. Things meant for evil can still be turned to good. And weeping may endure for a night, but joy still comes in the morning. Do I have a witness there? Would somebody stand with me as I make my way off this stage? But I stop by to tell you today that dreamers have divine resources. And because they marched back then and stood back then and came together back then, they changed the course of history. And so can we. When you lift the dream above the nightmare, God will help you. When Moses dreamed and defied Pharaoh, God helped him and brought the dream of justice to reality. When David dreamed and defied Goliath, God helped him and brought the dream of justice to pass. When Esther dreamed and defied an evil plot against her people, God helped her and brought the dream of justice to pass. When Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Swanner Channing Goodman and Dr. King and Nelson Mandela dreamed the dream of justice and defied evil, God helped them. I just stopped by as a country preacher to tell you that those who dream the dream of justice are not alone. The Lord is our light and our salvation. Greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. If God be for you, it doesn't matter if the whole world is against you. Nothing can separate you from the love of God, which is ours in Christ Jesus. No weapon formed against us shall prosper. And so it's our time. Many have held on to the dream before us, but it's our time. It's our time. And we will march for the dream. We will organize for the dream. We will go to court for the dream. We will pray for the dream. We will preach for the dream. We will fight for the dream. We will stand for the dream. We'll go to jail if necessary for the dream. We'll let the Lord use us for the dream. We will raise our children and our grandchildren for the dream. And we will never stop believing that with divine help, the mountains of injustice are overcomable. The valleys of despair are crossable. The problems and pains of life are solvable. Our spirits, even in hard times, are renewable. Enemies are defeatable and sometimes winnable. Righteousness is obtainable. Ways out of no ways are possible. And even if you die for what is right, our lives are redeemable. Make no mistake, North Carolina. Make no mistake, America. We know what the Apostle Paul told some people fighting 2,000 years ago. And it still applies to us. We are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And we will never give up on the dream. God bless you today. Forward together. Forward together. I want you to grab 3 people and say they should have left us alone. But since they have awakened us, we will live by the dream. Slap your neighbor high five and say the nightmare has no power over us. We are the children of the dream.